The night tasted like iron and gravel as I ran, lungs burning while the compound lights snapped on one by one. A siren wailed, slicing the dark into orders. Mara said, "Stop now and kneel." I kept running, feet raw, the fence humming like a throat about to sing. Father Gabriel said, "All strays return to the hand." I saw Ethan in the shadows, his mouth soft with apology that never came. The chapel door slammed, and 1,000 rehearsed prayers tightened like a noose. Jonas hissed, left gate, unlatched, and then vanished behind a ripple of black coats. Ruth watched from a window, hand on glass, a sentinel made of silence. Lily clutched her doll by the steps, the chant rising around her like cold fog. Dana's voice from a distant radio said, "If you can hear me, there is a road past the orchard." I leapt a puddle and felt the sky tilt, the fence taller than memory, my fear a drum that would not miss a beat. They circled like moths trained to chase flame, and the chants rose, each word a nail hammered into the night. Father Gabriel said, "Pain is the door we choose." My breath hitched as Mara counted down with a measured hand. Ethan said, "Please listen," but his eyes begged me to fail and be forgiven. Jonas drifted behind the cistern, a phantom mapping exits in his head. Ruth watched a second window, searching for a sign that would never arrive. Lily said, "They will tuck you in after prayers," and the sweetness cut deeper than any blade. The siren softened, replaced by boots and whispers. Dana crackled through the radio again, a rumor of roads and names. I stepped backward toward the orchard's black throat. The rules clung to my skin like wet linen, and the night refused to open. The orchard swallowed sound, leaves whispering rules I had memorized like prayers. Mara said, "On your knees," and the gravel answered for me. Father Gabriel said, "Mercy lives in surrender," and I tasted the old lie in the rain. Ethan hovered, a moon tethered to someone else's tide. Jonas said 3 steps, then run when I cough, and his courage felt like a match cupped in wind. Ruth's silhouette bent and straightened, counting breaths for both of us. Lily hummed the bedtime hymn, and the melody braided with siren aftershocks. Dana's voice faded to static, a lighthouse winking out. I thought of the day I arrived, of promises stitched with warmth. The fence hummed a warning, and my body replied with a tremor. The world narrowed to lungs, gravel, and the shape of a gate. They called it a reminder, a rite that polished fear into obedience. Father Gabriel said, "Confession is the hinge of freedom." Mara lifted the baton and let silence grow teeth. Ethan said, "She can learn," and the words rang like coins dropped into an empty plate. Jonas coughed once, a moth wing of sound. Ruth closed her eyes and drew an invisible cross on the glass. Lily said, "I can fetch warm towels," and the sweetness made the air ache. Dana's static rose like surf, and then collapsed. I stood not brave, only unwilling to drown again. The baton hovered, an eclipse about to happen. Somewhere, the orchard opened its mouth. The gate groaned, and night bled into the courtyard like ink let loose. Jonas said, "Now," and the word cut the rope inside my chest. I moved, a thread slipping from a needle, and the world lurched into clarity. Mara said, "Hold," too late for the moment to obey. Father Gabriel said, "All flight is a circle," and the prophecy cracked under my heel. Ethan reached, but his hand found only rain. Ruth flung the window wide and finally breathed. Lily said, "Don't fall," and the kindness steadied my step. Dana's voice returned, thin but stubborn, guiding like a star trapped in wire. I ran, not away from them, but toward a name I had not used in years. Then sang, and the night opened 1 inch more. The morning crawled inside the compound like a thief wearing sunlight, but the walls turned gold into gray. Olivia said, "I thought they loved me," and her words sagged like damp cloth. Father Gabriel stood before the circle of wooden benches, his arms wide like a shepherd of stone. He said, "Family is the fire, and without it you freeze." Mara paced behind him, boots echoing, baton knotting against her thigh like a metronome of fear. Ethan whispered, It feels safe because we know no other way. But his lips trembled as though caught between two storms. Jonas leaned against the back rail, eyes darting, marking every crack in the wood. Ruth sat with folded hands, watching with that heavy silence that trapped more than it freed. Lily clutched her doll, her smile soft and blind to the ritual's weight. Dana's voice was absent here, her world still out there beyond the barbed sky. I sat in the circle, my chest hollow, and wondered if my name still lived beyond these benches. The dining hall smelled of boiled roots and smoke, its windows nailed shut, the light weak and sour. Father Gabriel said, "A meal without obedience is poison," and the wooden bowls trembled under his gaze. Mara stalked between rows of bodies, eyes slicing into the hesitant. Ethan passed me bread, his fingers brushing mine, his whisper saying, "Eat or they'll see." Ruth's lips moved with silent prayer, her knuckles white. Jonas coughed, a signal or a symptom, hard to know. Lily giggled, crumbs clinging to her cheeks, innocent in her hunger. I forced each bite down like swallowing stones. The chants rose even here, a background hum that drowned the clatter of spoons. Every eye pretended devotion, every shadow hid rebellion. I wondered if eating meant surrender, or simply surviving another hour. The prayer room was dim, only wax and silence filling cracks in the stone. Father Gabriel said, "Kneel, and the chain becomes wings." His words fluttered like moths dying on glass. I lowered myself, knees bruised by cold floorboards. Mara's gaze pinned me, daring defiance. Ethan whispered, "Just follow," though his eyes begged me to stand. Jonas leaned in the back corner, shoulders tight, teeth biting his lip raw. Ruth pressed her forehead to the floor, drowning in her ritual. Lily knelt beside me, small hands folded, humming the hymn she barely understood. I felt my voice leave my throat, replaced by echoes not my own. The doctrine seeped in, not like belief, but like smoke that stains without fire. I thought of open skies, but the roof pressed closer, making each breath a confession. Dormitories stretched with rows of iron beds, blankets thin as paper. Father Gabriel's voice echoed from the hall, "Sleep with duty, wake with light." I lay staring at the rafters, counting breaths instead of sheep. Ethan whispered, "Do you remember home?" And the word cracked like glass in my chest. Jonas shifted near the door, eyes never closing. Ruth adjusted Lily's blanket, her face softening only in shadows. Mara checked locks with a heavy ring of keys, each click a sentence. Lily said, "Can you tell me a story?" And the innocence made the dark hurt. I whispered a tale without ending, one where roads stayed open. Outside, wind scraped against boards, reminding me freedom had a voice. Dawn came with whistles and orders, not birdsong. Father Gabriel said, "Work proves devotion." We marched into fields thick with mud, hands blistering under ropes and tools. Mara barked names, her voice a whip. Ethan carried too much, his back bent, and I wanted to take his burden, but fear held me still. Jonas muttered, "Count rows, not hours," and his eyes measured distance to the fence. Ruth dragged the hoe through soil, lips silent but eyes breaking. Lily followed behind, her small basket too heavy, yet she smiled as though it were play. My palms bled, the dirt swallowing drops. The sky stretched wide above, mocking with its endless blue. Each strike of the hoe was both a prayer and a shackle. The rules multiplied like weeds after rain, posted on doors and whispered at dawn. Father Gabriel said, "Repetition is freedom dressed in mercy." The words looped until they felt like air. Mara walked the corridors, ticking names with a hunter's patience. Ethan said, "Keep your head down," and his voice shook as if holding glass. Jonas mapped rotations, counting steps between blind corners. Ruth folded linens with sacred precision, hiding tremors in neat edges. Lily practiced recitations, her small mouth shaping thunder. I scrubbed floors until my reflection vanished in the water. The bell rang for silence, and even our thoughts obeyed. I felt the walls lean closer, learning my heartbeat by rote. The confession line curled around the chapel like a noose drawn slow. Father Gabriel said, "Speak your rot so light can drink it." He smiled with a saint's stillness that scraped bone. Mara tapped the baton against stone, each click a metronome for shame. Ethan murmured, "Say something small, as if small sins were cheaper." Jonas said, "Say nothing they can use," and stared at the floor. Ruth whispered prayers that sounded like apologies. Lily watched from a bench, confusion painted bright on her face. My turn arrived, and the room shrank to breath and wood. I said, "I doubted the path," and the words fell heavy as wet rope. The circle hummed approval, and my chest felt emptied with a spoon. They separated us by usefulness, calling it the sorting. Father Gabriel said, "Families are forged by purpose, not blood." The words sliced clean. Mara distributed badges with colors that decided beds, labor, and speech. Ethan's color placed him far from me, and our eyes parted like trains passing. Jonas slipped me a map drawn on linen thread. Ruth was moved to the infirmary, her silence conscripted as comfort. Lily was sent to doctrine school, a place with bright paint and colder rules. I stood in the yard, badge hot against my skin, and felt the Colt's hand rearrange my bones. The sky was huge and empty, a joke with no punchline. I learned the new path to defense by counting breaths. The drills began before dawn and ended after the moon frayed. Father Gabriel said, "The body must learn the hymn the mouth forgets." We marched fields until mud became a second skin. Mara timed us, calling out faults like crimes. Ethan stumbled and caught himself on the rake, cheeks ghost pale. Jonas matched my pace, whispering counts that hid a message. Ruth passed with water, her eyes flicking hope like a match. Lily waved from the school fence, small hand brave against wire. I felt sleep slide away like a rope cut loose. The chant swelled until my thoughts wore uniforms. The sky offered no exit, only witness. Night brought audits, not rest. Father Gabriel said, "Truth is easiest to find when the body is tired." Mara searched bunks with a lantern that made every breath visible. Ethan said, "Hide nothing but fear," stained his whisper. Jonas pressed a note into the mattress seam, a tiny map of hope. Ruth stood by the door, ready to vouch that we slept. Lily dreamed in the schoolhouse, lips moving with a hymn. The lantern stopped at my bed, and I felt the note like a thunderhead beneath cotton. Mara said, "What do we learn when we are watched?" I answered, "We learn to be small." The lantern drifted on, and my heart beat a code I dared not speak. The truth cracked open like rotten timber, spilling rot that had been painted gold. Father Gabriel said, "I carry the light," but his ledger told of hoarded money and bribes. Mara's eyes flickered when she saw it, but she held her silence like a blade. Ethan whispered, "We've been giving him our lives, and he sells them like grain." Jonas tugged me aside, pressing a folded paper, proof that names were sold to outsiders. Ruth trembled at the infirmary door, muttering prayers to drown the screams behind her. Lily asked, "Why are there locks on the schoolhouse?" and her innocence scraped raw against the lie. My chest hollowed with each breath, the walls now thinner, secrets bleeding through. The chants no longer sounded like faith, but like chains rattling in empty hands. The betrayal came not from strangers but from blood. Ethan said, "I can't protect you," and his words twisted into knives. He handed Father Gabriel the note Jonas risked to write. The leader smiled, his mask of mercy unbroken, and said, "The lamb offers itself." Mara's grip tightened on my arm, her baton ready. Jonas stared at Ethan, fury mixing with pity. Ruth cried, "Not him, please," her voice breaking against stone. Lily pressed her face to the bars, small fists clenched. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, trust shattered like glass under boot heels. My brother's eyes held tears, but no rescue. Family, once rope, now noose. They called it a purification, but it was punishment dressed in ritual. Father Gabriel said, "Disobedience burns away with fire." A torch was lit, its smoke heavy with oil. Mara forced me to kneel as the chants rose like a storm. Ethan turned his face, unable to watch, his shoulders hunched in shame. Jonas said, "Hold steady," though he shook himself. Ruth covered Lily's eyes, whispering soft prayers that failed to hide her sobs. The flame kissed the rope near my hands, heat searing skin. Father Gabriel smiled as though divinity were born from cruelty. I swallowed the scream, knowing noise would feed them. The night smelled of ash and lies. The revelation cut deeper when Jonas whispered, "He sells children too." My heart stilled, Lily's giggle from earlier echoing like a ghost. Father Gabriel said, "Sacrifice is the highest devotion," and his hand lingered too long on the small locked door. Mara's face betrayed a flicker, a crack in her iron mask. Ethan trembled, eyes wet, yet stood unmoving beside him. Ruth gasped, clutching her chest as if struck. Lily said, "Will I go away too?" And the air thickened with dread. The chant began again, rhythmic and cruel. I thought then that freedom might only come in blood. The chants thundered through the hall, but inside me silence grew sharp. Father Gabriel raised his arms, declaring, "Obedience is the bridge to eternity." Mara shouted for us to kneel, her voice brittle now. Ethan's lips moved with the chant, but his eyes begged forgiveness. Jonas muttered, "Not eternity, just cages," his defiance barely audible. Ruth lifted Lily into her lap, rocking as though to shield her with rhythm. I said nothing, my silence heavier than stone. The leader's mask gleamed in torchlight, but for the first time I saw the cracks. The truth was bare. We were not family, only prisoners dressed as believers. The night split open when Jonas whispered, "Now or never," and the words cracked like thunder in my skull. Father Gabriel's voice still echoed from the hall, calling obedience eternity. Mara's boots pounded close, her breath hot with command. Ethan said, "If you go, you die," his hand brushing mine as if to tether me. Ruth gripped Lily tighter, rocking her against the storm of chants. The torchlight flickered on stone, shadows leaping like hunters. Jonas shoved a key into my palm, his eyes burning with defiance. I swallowed my fear, the iron heavy in my fist. Lily whispered, "Please don't leave me," her small voice piercing deeper than chains. I said, "I won't," though my chest felt like breaking glass. The compound rumbled, the world tilting toward either escape or ruin. The gate loomed like a beast with teeth of rust, its lock thick as an anchor. Jonas hissed, "Hurry," as his hands fumbled with the chains. Father Gabriel shouted behind us, "No lamb leaves the fold alive." Mara sprinted closer, baton raised to strike. Ethan blocked her path for one heartbeat, whispering, "Go," before her arms swung like thunder. Ruth prayed under her breath, clutching Lily close, her face streaked with tears. Lily said, "Run, please," her voice breaking the night's iron. My fingers shook as I forced the key into the lock, the sound of turning metal louder than drums. Freedom tasted like blood in my mouth. The chants became a roar, the night waiting on the other side. The chain snapped with a scream, and the gate yawned open to fields washed silver by the moon. Jonas said, "Run," his voice raw and urgent. Father Gabriel roared, "You are nothing without me," his words chasing us like dogs. Mara's baton cracked against Ethan, and he fell, breath ripped from him. I grabbed his hand, dragging him as his blood marked the dirt. Ruth stumbled forward with Lily, her body a shield against the dark. Lily sobbed, "Don't stop," her small legs trembling but determined. Jonas pulled us into the orchard path, branches clawing like fingers. The air smelled of wet leaves and smoke. I felt freedom's edge sharp as glass beneath my feet, every step a gamble with fire. The sirens wailed, red light spinning across the orchard, shadows twisting like claws. Jonas shouted, "Split up," but my heart refused to let go. Father Gabriel's voice thundered, "Return or burn." Mara's boots cut through mud, closer each second. Ethan gasped, "Leave me," his wound slowing us like stone. I said, "No," dragging him onward as his blood streaked my hands. Ruth lifted Lily into her arms, running blind through branches. Lily clung to her neck, whispering the hymn through tears. Jonas disappeared into the trees, a phantom with fire in his veins. The night screamed with alarms, but my chest screamed louder. Every breath tasted of iron and fear. Every step dared the ground to give way. The fence rose before us, taller than memory, wires humming like serpents. Jonas emerged from the dark, face streaked with dirt, bolt cutters in hand. He said, "This is it," and sparks leapt as steel met steel. Father Gabriel screamed from behind, his voice breaking into fury. Mara charged, baton high, a storm made flesh. Ethan whispered, "Go," his face pale as snow, blood pooling beneath him. Ruth cried out, "We can't leave him," but her arms tightened around Lily. Lily said, "Please don't stop," her eyes wide with terror. Then split open, a jagged mouth of freedom. I pulled Ethan through as sparks rained like stars. My heart beat louder than the alarms, one step away from the unknown. Dawn found us staggering along a service road that smelled of wet iron and pine. Jonas said, "Gravel to asphalt, we're nearly ghosts." Ethan leaned on me, breath thin as paper, eyes stubbornly bright. Ruth whispered, "One more bend," as Lily pressed her face to my shoulder. A truck slowed and Dana stepped out with a recorder hanging like a badge. She said, "You are safe with me," and the words trembled but held. Sirens faded into the hills, replaced by ordinary birds that felt unreal. Jonas scanned the tree line, mapping exits even in mercy. Ethan said, "I'm sorry for every closed door," and I believed him because blood tells the truth. Dana wrapped us in thermal blankets that scratched and warmed. I tasted air without rules and wept into the gray morning. The clinic waited behind mirrored doors that sighed like tired lungs. A nurse said, "You're safe," and taped gauze over Ethan's ribs. Dana argued with a deputy who wanted statements before stitches. She said, "They need rest, not headlines," planting her body between us and the badge. Jonas paced the hallway, counting exits by habit he could not kill. Ruth stroked Lily's hair and whispered a lullaby without doctrine. Lily asked, "Do we sleep without prayers?" and her voice made the room hold its breath. I said, "We can sleep with names instead," and listed them like stars. Ethan smiled through pain, as if the map of his future could still be redrawn. The deputy softened, notebook closing like a door choosing mercy. The fluorescents hummed a gentler hymn. The shelter offered cots, tea, and a bulletin board of missing faces, like a choir of unanswered questions. Dana said, "Take the top room," and left a phone with numbers we could call. Jonas unfolded his map and burned it in a coffee can, watching smoke write forgiveness. Ethan said, "I kept quiet for too long," and the words seemed to lift stitches, not break them. Ruth pressed her palms to her eyes and said, "I taught them to obey," then fell quiet as tide. Lily lined up shoes under the bed and asked which pair meant home. I said all of them, and she laughed small and bright. The radiators clicked, stubborn and kind. Outside, traffic stitched a steady pulse that felt like a promise. Inside, we practiced breathing without permission and did not fail. The interviews began with soft voices and pens that never stopped moving. The detective said, "Tell me what was promised," and silence cracked like ice. I described ledgers, locks, and the night the rope kissed fire. Jonas mapped routes, names, and bribes with soldier precision. Ethan admitted his betrayal as if it were a wound he chose to clean. Ruth offered the hymns as evidence of control, each lyric a chain. Lily drew the schoolhouse with bars on windows, her crayons steady. Dana recorded with care and said, "You decide what is used," handing agency back like a key. The room did not heal us, but it believed us. When we left, the sky felt a shade lighter. Night returned with a softer edge, yet the past kept tapping the glass. Ethan said, "I still hear the chant," and I heard it too, thin as wind in vents. Jonas checked locks once, then twice, then once more, smiling at his own habit. Ruth tucked Lily in and whispered a story with doors that always opened. Lily murmured, "I like that ending," and drifted into a quiet without sirens. Dana sat by the window, typing, then paused to say, "You owe them nothing." I stood under the bathroom light, tracing scars like constellations that named a new sky. I said, "Tomorrow we choose our own rituals," and the mirror did not disagree. Somewhere, the night finally let go of my throat. Sleep came dressed as mercy, and I allowed it in. The morning sun felt like a lie, too bright against the shadows that lived inside us. Ethan said, "We're free," but his hand still trembled like a boy afraid of thunder. Jonas stared at the skyline, muttering, "Walls are everywhere if you look hard enough." Ruth folded Lily's coat and whispered, "At least she will know another story." Lily pointed to a passing bird and said, "That one's not trapped," her smile fragile but real. Dana said, "The world will hear this," holding her recorder like a weapon made of truth. I breathed deep, the air sharp, the memory heavier than the sky. Freedom tasted strange, sweet, and bitter, like medicine that heals but leaves scars. The courtroom smelled of dust and judgment, every word etched into silence like stone. Father Gabriel said, "They begged for my guidance," his voice silk hiding rot. Mara sat rigid, face carved from steel, loyalty burning her from the inside. Ethan leaned on his cane and whispered, "He still lies." Jonas passed papers to lawyers, each one a nail for the coffin. Ruth's eyes watered as Lily clutched her hand, whispering, "Don't let him take us back." Dana's flashbulb clicked, capturing truth for the world. I said, "He caged us and called it family," and my voice shook but did not break. For once the chains clattered in his hands, not mine. The verdict fell like a door closing, sharp and final. The judge said, "Guilty," and the chant of justice drowned the chant of control. Father Gabriel's mask cracked, his eyes wild with fear that power no longer answered. Mara gritted her teeth, chains rattling as marshals led her away. Ethan whispered, "It's over," though he didn't believe it fully. Jonas smirked, the first real smile I'd seen, small and jagged. Ruth bowed her head, shoulders shaking with relief. Lily clapped softly, a child's applause in a room of stone. Dana said, "The story is theirs now," and lowered her camera. I felt my chest open, light rushing in where there had only been smoke. The world outside the courthouse moved fast, cars and voices unbothered by the ghosts we carried. Ethan said, "We'll never be normal," his eyes on the street's blur. Jonas replied, "Normal isn't the goal, breathing is." Ruth kissed Lily's hair, whispering, "You'll never bow to them again." Lily asked, "Can we build a house with no locks?" And the question cut both ways. Dana said, "The scars will tell the truth louder than the cult ever did." I held their faces in memory like anchors. The future stretched out wide, frightening, beautiful, and uncertain. I said, "We survived," and for the first time the words did not feel borrowed. Night fell quiet, the city lights glowing like stars that refused to dim. Ethan slept soundly for the first time, his chest rising steady. Jonas sat by the window, no maps in hand, only breath. Ruth read softly to Lily, who whispered, "This story doesn't end with fire," before drifting into dreams. Dana typed until she paused, staring at us with something like pride. I touched the scar on my palm and said, "I still hear them chanting in my sleep." The room stilled, but no one fled. We belonged not because of chains but because survival bound us. The final silence tasted of truth, heavy but ours. Only two words remained: never again.